Imagine a wealthy, white millionaire, Johnny Trent, stunning his elite circle by adopting 7 black sisters. The news spread like wildfire, sparking whispers, sneers, and judgment. Yet, years later, those same critics find themselves on their knees, desperate and pleading before Johnny. What shocking twist has left them in this state of despair? As you ponder, comment below where you're tuning in from, and if you're intrigued, don't forget to subscribe for more captivating stories. Johnny Trent stood alone, gazing out over the city as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting an orange glow. His hand brushed over a framed photo on his desk, his late daughter Mina's last school picture, her bright eyes and infectious smile frozen in time. It had been 5 painful years since he lost her, and her room remained untouched, a quiet monument to the life he'd never get back. Earlier that day, during a routine investment meeting at Children's Hope Foster Home, something changed in him. He'd seen 7 young sisters in the courtyard, their laughter echoing like Mina's had once filled his home. Mrs. Rodriguez, the foster home director, had explained their difficult situation. Most families can't take on 7 children together. Her words hung in the air, the burden of separation visible in her eyes. Now, back at his office, Johnny spread the girls' photos across his desk, their young faces looking up at him, each filled with hope and innocence. "What would you think, Mina?" he whispered, glancing at her photo. Would she want her dad to share his heart with 7 new daughters? The thought of laughter, love, and life returning to his empty penthouse was both thrilling and terrifying. He knew the challenges they'd face. A wealthy white man raising 7 black girls would raise more than just eyebrows. Charity galas, school events, and even the most polite circles would be thick with prejudice. But after watching his daughter slip away, helpless to save her despite all his wealth, Johnny realized this was something he could control. He could protect these girls, give them a life where they'd never doubt their worth or love. The decision filled him with purpose. He picked up the phone, his heart racing as he dialed. When Mrs. Rodriguez answered, he spoke with unwavering certainty, "I'd like to start the adoption process." His eyes fell once more on Mina's photo, her smile seeming to approve of this new path he was setting out on. Johnny felt a weight lift from his heart. The path ahead would be tough, filled with legal hoops, home studies, and countless adjustments. But, for the first time since Mina's passing, he felt a spark of hope. Hope for a future filled with laughter, love, and the joy of fatherhood. In the days that followed, morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of Johnny's mansion as he made a final check of each of the girls' rooms. Each space had been prepared with care, soft bedding, clothes, and personal touches he hoped they'd like. Just as he smoothed down a pink comforter, the sound of car tires crunching on the driveway made his heart race. Peeking through the window, he watched as 7 young girls stepped out, clutching their few belongings in worn bags. The oldest, Maya, held the youngest's hand protectively as they approached the front door, their steps hesitant, their eyes wide with uncertainty. Before they could knock, Johnny opened the door and greeted them, his voice warm and welcoming. "Welcome home." His words hung in the air, and he noticed some of the girls couldn't meet his gaze, while others looked up, wide-eyed, at the sparkling chandelier overhead. This is all yours?" 11-year-old Kira asked, her voice barely a whisper. Johnny smiled, his heart swelling. "No, it's ours now, all of ours." 5-year-old Tessa peeked out shyly from behind Maya. "Even the fancy lights?" she asked, her small voice laced with wonder. Johnny chuckled, nodding. "Even the fancy lights. Would you like to see your rooms? Each of you has your own, but they're all close together." The girls exchanged uncertain glances. They had never had rooms of their own. As they climbed the grand staircase, their hands brushed along the polished banister, their small frames clustering together, like flowers bound tightly for strength. At the top of the stairs, Johnny knelt down, looking into each of their faces. "I know it feels strange right now," he said softly, "but this isn't just a place to stay. It's your home now. Your forever home." 6-year-old Jasmine clutched the strap of her backpack, her face drawn with worry. What if we don't fit in here?" Johnny's heart ached at her hesitation. "You already fit in perfectly," he said, his voice gentle but certain. "This isn't about fitting into a house or a neighborhood. This is about being a family. and families are meant to be together. He gestured down the hallway lined with doors, his eyes soft with encouragement. So please make yourselves at home. Jump on the beds if you want, put up posters, leave your shoes wherever you like. This is your space, to be exactly who you are. Maya took a tentative step forward, still clutching Tessa's hand tightly. You really mean it? All of it? Every word, Johnny replied, his eyes misting with emotion. We've got a lot to learn about each other, but we've got all the time in the world. Families grow together. Slowly, the tension began to melt from the girls' faces. Tessa, the youngest, released her sister's hand, taking a small but brave step forward. A soft smile played across her face, and for the first time, Johnny saw the future he had dreamed of, a house filled with laughter, and a family that, against all odds, had finally found its way home. As the girls explored the grand hallway, Maya spun in a twirl, her braids swinging, laughter bubbling up as her sister's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Johnny grinned, reaching for a door. Who wants to see their room first? He asked, his heart swelling at their joy. A few days later, Johnny found himself walking up the path to the country club, autumn leaves crunching underfoot. The annual neighborhood barbecue was in full swing, with clusters of wealthy neighbors mingling on the pristine lawn, their designer outfits signaling casual luxury. He had left the girls at home with their tutor, trying to keep a sense of normalcy while he made a quick appearance. As he approached, conversations quieted, only to resume in hushed tones once he passed. Margot Wellington, who'd always eagerly invited him to her Christmas galas, suddenly became engrossed in her phone as he waved. Tom Bradford, his usual golf partner, glanced at his watch and hurried off in the opposite direction. Johnny reached the buffet table, but as he filled his plate, snippets of a conversation drifted from behind a nearby hedge. Did you hear about Johnny Trent's latest investment? Sneered Richard Cooper, his voice thick with sarcasm. 7 of them. Can you imagine? Barbara Stevens, who lived just down the street, chimed in. He's always had a flair for the dramatic. But this, it's just unseemly. My wife says he's turned that beautiful mansion into a charity ward. Property values will plummet, muttered another voice, low and disapproving. Johnny's grip on his plate tightened, his jaw clenched, but he remained silent, listening. Does he really think he's some kind of savior? Richard scoffed. Taking in those poor souls? But they're not exactly country club material, if you know what I mean. Laughter rippled through the group, each chuckle a jab at the family he was building. Barbara's voice rose above the others, dripping with false certainty. Once he realizes what he's gotten himself into, he'll ship them back. Mark my words, a charity case is still a charity case, no matter how much money you throw at it. Johnny set his untouched plate on the nearest table, any trace of appetite gone. These were people he'd known for years, shared dinners with, trusted with business, and now their true colors were shining through, uglier than he could have imagined. Turning to leave, he nearly bumped into Elizabeth Chen, another neighbor. She averted her eyes quickly, stepping back as if his very presence might tarnish her. The walk to his car felt endless, each step heavier under the weight of judgment. Fragments of their conversation, words like publicity stunt and midlife crisis, echoed around him in the breeze. But as he reached his car, he straightened, a renewed resolve filling him. Let them talk, he thought. Let them judge. Their opinions were nothing compared to the 7 lives waiting for him at home. His daughters weren't a charity case. They were his family. And he would move mountains to protect them from people like this. The following weekend, Johnny decided it was time to introduce his daughters to the community. The neighborhood's annual fall festival at the local park seemed perfect, with pumpkin decorating, face painting, and carnival games. An atmosphere that he hoped would make the girls' introduction a little smoother. As they walked through the entrance, Johnny squeezed Maya's hand and smiled reassuringly. Remember, girls, you have every right to be here. 7-year-old Maya clutched his right hand tightly, while 6-year-old Jasmine held his left with confidence. Behind them, their younger sisters followed closely, wide-eyed with excitement. But as they ventured deeper into the festival, Johnny noticed how the cheerful buzz around them began to dim. Parents suddenly gathered their children from the bounce house, murmuring about snack time and bathroom breaks. The face painting station posted a "taking a break" sign just as 4-year-old Sarah eagerly approached it. "Daddy," Maya whispered, tugging at his sleeve, her voice small. "Why is everyone looking at us like that?" Johnny's heart ached, but he kept his tone steady. "Some people aren't used to seeing new faces, sweetheart. Give them a little time." They reached the pumpkin decorating station, where a few children still lingered despite their parents' discomfort. 4-year-old Rachel's face lit up as she picked a small pumpkin, her eyes wide with excitement as she gazed at the colorful ribbons and stickers. Just as she reached for a sparkly sticker, a sharp voice cut through the air. "I don't believe those pumpkins are free," snapped Victoria Hamilton, the neighborhood association president, her arms crossed tightly. Johnny met her gaze, his expression calm though his blood boiled underneath. "I was under the impression the pumpkins were included in the admission," he replied, pulling out his wallet. "But if not, that's fine. We'll take 7. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. "Mr. Trent, I hope you understand that we have certain standards in this community. Standards that maintain property values and a certain quality of life. Perhaps your girls would be more comfortable at the public fall festival downtown." Johnny saw Rachel's small shoulders slump as she placed her pumpkin back on the table, the hurt plain on her face. He fought the urge to snap back, knowing his reaction would be remembered by his daughters. With a steady voice, he replied, "Actually, Mrs. Hamilton, my daughters and I are perfectly comfortable here. Since we've already paid for admission, we'll take those pumpkins now." He placed 7 crisp $5 bills on the table and added, "Keep the change, maybe it'll help maintain those standards you're so concerned about." Turning to his girls, who watched the exchange with a mix of confusion and sadness, Johnny smiled. "Come on, my loves. Let's decorate these pumpkins and make them the prettiest ones in the whole festival." The following week, Johnny stood in his study, finalizing plans for what would become the most lavish event of the season, a welcome gala that would send a message the neighborhood wouldn't forget. From the string quartet to gourmet hors d'oeuvres, every detail would set a new standard, one that made room for his family. The day of the gala had arrived, and Johnny's mansion transformed into an enchanting wonderland. Twinkling lights adorned the grand staircase, draped with white roses, casting a soft, inviting glow throughout the room. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the space, highlighting elegant table settings and filling the air with an aroma of fresh flowers, a fitting scene for an unforgettable night. Upstairs, the girls were getting ready, their giggles blending with nervous whispers. Hairstylists and makeup artists had worked their magic, helping each girl feel like royalty. One by one, they emerged, each radiating elegance. Tessa in deep blue, Tiana in purple, Maya in pink, Jasmine in yellow, Sarah in mint green, Rachel in lavender, and little Kira in white. Johnny's heart swelled as he looked at his daughters, each a picture of grace and beauty. As he adjusted Maya's sparkly headband, she looked up at him and asked, "Are you nervous, Dad?" With a warm smile, Johnny placed a hand on her shoulder. "Little. But remember, being nervous just means this is important. And you girls are the most important thing to me." As the first guests were about to arrive, Johnny gathered his daughters in the grand foyer. Standing together, they embodied hope, resilience, and pride, a family ready to step into the spotlight, unafraid. He looked at each of them and said, "You are Trent's now. Hold your heads high and remember that tonight is about celebrating us as a family." The doorbell chimed, and 7 pairs of eyes turned towards the sound. Johnny gave them a reassuring nod, feeling his pride surge as they stood tall beside him. No matter what awaited them on the other side of that door, they would face it together. As the clock struck 7, the soft melody of violins filled the foyer, and Johnny watched with pride as his daughters descended the grand staircase, their dresses flowing in a rainbow of colors. Guests turned to watch, captivated by the sight. The caterers moved elegantly through the room, offering trays of hors d'oeuvres and sparkling drinks as the chandelier's warm light bathed the room in a gentle glow. The night was only beginning, and Johnny knew that whatever whispers and judgments lingered outside, tonight belonged to them, and no one could take that away. Johnny's voice was calm but filled with a determination he hoped would reach his daughters' hearts. "Rachel," he said, looking her in the eyes, "people often fear what they don't understand. Last night, they chose to walk away because they don't see the beauty and strength I see in each of you. The room was silent, with each daughter absorbing his words. Little Kira broke the silence, her small voice hesitant. But, Daddy, will they ever accept us? Johnny took a deep breath, steadying himself before he spoke. Maybe one day they will. Maybe they won't. But that doesn't change who you are, smart, kind, and courageous. And it doesn't change the family we've become. Rachel, the oldest, let out a shaky breath, her eyes brimming with tears. It just hurts, Dad. We tried so hard to fit in. Johnny moved around the table, gathering them into his arms. I know, sweetheart, but we're not here to fit into their world. We're here to create our own. We're going to show them, slowly and surely, who we really are. And whether they like it or not, they'll see a family built on love and respect. As he spoke, Johnny felt the weight lift from his daughters' faces. In their eyes, he saw a glimmer of resilience, the first sparks of hope rekindling. In the following days, they turned their focus inward, embracing small family traditions. They laughed over shared meals, painted together, and filled the once quiet mansion with the sounds of their lives, leaving traces of joy and warmth in every room. And slowly, people began to take notice of the laughter that spilled from the windows, the sight of Johnny's daughters running through the yard, the undeniable bond between them. Word spread around the neighborhood, but this time, it wasn't about gossip or disapproval. It was about a man who'd taken in 7 girls and made them his own, showing the true meaning of family. And whether or not the world accepted them, Johnny and his daughters knew they were exactly where they belonged, together, but now they barely acknowledged his existence. It stung, but Johnny refused to let it show. His focus was on his daughters, their laughter, their growth, and the joy that filled the house, even if the outside world couldn't see it. That afternoon, Johnny stood in the library doorway, watching his girls work together. Maya and Rachel were practicing their piano duet while Jasmine helped Tessa with a science project. Kira, always curious, was flipping through a book about the stars, her tiny finger tracing constellations. It was a quiet, peaceful scene, a far cry from the judgment and whispers outside these walls. Everything okay, Daddy? Maya asked, glancing up from the piano, her fingers pausing on the keys. Johnny smiled, his heart full. Everything's perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect. But as he watched his daughters, he couldn't ignore the lingering doubts. The whispers, the cold shoulders. It hurt to see them go through this. Yet he reminded himself every day that they were stronger than the opinions of others. They had each other, and together, they were unbreakable. Still, the isolation weighed heavily. Johnny had built a beautiful life for them, but what if it wasn't enough? What if the world never truly accepted his daughters? As the days passed, Johnny noticed something else, something he hadn't expected. The girls were thriving, each day bringing new moments of discovery, new talents emerging, new friendships being forged through homeschool groups and activities. They were no longer the shy, uncertain girls who had arrived on his doorstep. They were becoming confident, capable young women, and they were doing it all together. One evening, after a long day of lessons, Johnny took a walk through the garden, needing some time to clear his mind. The moonlight cast long shadows over the grounds, and he breathed in the cool air, allowing the stillness to calm his thoughts. Everything's changing, Johnny muttered to himself, feeling the weight of the decision he had made to keep his family close, to shield them from the judgment of the world. But was it the right choice? Was he doing the right thing for his daughters, or was he holding them back? His thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps behind him. He turned to see Maya, Tessa, and Rachel coming toward him, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the lanterns lining the path. "You okay, Daddy?" Rachel asked, concern in her eyes. "You've been quiet tonight." Johnny smiled, trying to mask the uncertainty that still lingered in his chest. "Just thinking," he said softly. "But don't worry, I'm okay." Maya stepped forward, her voice steady. "I think you made the right choice, Daddy. We're all happy here." Tessa nodded in agreement, her face lighting up with her bright smile. "I love our home." Johnny knelt down to their level, looking into their eyes. "You girls make me so proud. You're strong, and I'm proud of who you are. You've shown me what real family is all about." He hugged them close, feeling their warmth and strength surrounding him. For the first time in a long while, Johnny felt at peace. The world outside could judge them, whisper about them, but inside these walls, they were home. And that was all that truly mattered. No matter what the world thought, Johnny knew that as long as they had each other, they would always belong. That was cold, distant, and unforgiving, as if it were written by someone who had no concept of the warmth and love Johnny had created within his home. It was an invitation to the annual neighborhood meeting, where all residents were expected to discuss community issues and new developments. The letter was a thinly veiled attempt to address his family's presence, and the implications were clear: they weren't welcome. Johnny's jaw clenched as he read between the lines. This wasn't a simple meeting. It was their way of reminding him that he didn't belong. The girls had been thriving, growing in ways he hadn't expected, and yet here was this cold reminder that despite all their progress, they were still considered outsiders. He felt a surge of anger rise within him, but he quickly pushed it down. No matter what the letter said, no matter how the neighbors tried to cast them aside, he would not let it affect them. They were his family and they were strong. Johnny placed the letter back into the envelope with careful precision. He had always believed that the opinions of others didn't matter, but even now, as he felt the weight of this rejection, the sting was undeniable. His thoughts turned to his daughters. They had faced so much already. Could they handle more rejection? He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out over the garden. His daughters were outside, laughing and playing. Tessa was helping Maya with her ballet stretches, while Sarah and Rachel were discussing the colors they'd use for their next painting. The sound of their laughter was a balm to his soul, reminding him of what truly mattered. Johnny turned away from the window and walked toward the door. He needed to be with them. They needed him more than anything right now. As he entered the backyard, his girls stopped what they were doing and looked up at him, their faces bright with smiles. "Daddy, watch me," Jasmine called, her soccer ball at her feet. "I saw you score 5 goals earlier today," Johnny said, his voice warm. "You're getting better every day." Jasmine beamed, and the other girls gathered around him, each of them excited to share their accomplishments. But Johnny knew that, despite all their successes, they were still missing something: acceptance from the world outside. "Girls," Johnny began, his voice steady, "I've been thinking. The world might not always accept us, and that's okay. What matters is that we have each other. We are a family, and we support each other no matter what anyone says. You've all shown me just how strong you are, and nothing can change that." Tessa stepped forward, her eyes shining with pride. "We're stronger together, Daddy." Rachel nodded, her hand resting gently on her younger sister's shoulder. "We don't need anyone else to tell us we're good enough." Johnny smiled, feeling a weight lift from his chest. They didn't need the approval of the world. They had created something far more valuable within their own walls. A family built on love, trust, and understanding. And that was enough. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Johnny stood there with his daughters, watching them. The world might have rejected them, but they had found something even more important: acceptance within themselves and the unbreakable bond of family. And in that moment, Johnny knew, as long as they had each other, they would never be alone. The next day, feeling a mixture of anger and resolve. The legal papers were in front of him, but he couldn't stop the image of his daughters' confused, hurt faces from playing on repeat in his mind. The night before, they had all gone to bed in silence, the weight of what had been said hanging over them. He had promised them everything would be okay, but in his heart, he knew the fight ahead was going to be anything but easy. "You've got a solid case," James, his lawyer, said, breaking his thoughts. "These allegations are based on prejudice, not facts. Property values can't be legally tied to the color of someone's skin. We'll need to file a formal response and start gathering evidence of the discrimination you've been facing. And I can assure you, we'll go to court if it comes to that." Johnny nodded, the determination in his chest strengthening. "We'll fight. I'm not backing down. I won't let them tear my family apart." As the meeting ended, Johnny's thoughts were on the future. The neighborhood's attempt to push them out was more than just an attack on their home. It was an attack on everything they had built. The love, the growth, the family bonds, they were all under threat, but Johnny wasn't going to let that happen. His daughters had already been through enough rejection. They didn't deserve to lose the place they finally called home. Later that evening, Johnny sat with the girls in the living room, the tension still lingering from their earlier dinner. But he refused to let fear or doubt take root. This was their family, their home, and he would protect it at all costs. "All right, girls," he said, gathering their attention. "I want to tell you something important, something I need you to understand. What's happening with the neighborhood association is unfair. They're trying to tell us that we don't belong here. But the truth is, we belong wherever we choose to be. This house, this life we've built, it's ours. We've earned it." The girls listened, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. Johnny could see the uncertainty still in their eyes. He walked over to the fireplace where a family photo hung and he pointed to it. "This right here," he said, his finger tracing the edges of the frame, "this is what matters. Not what anyone else thinks, not their standards. What matters is the love we share. We have each other, and nothing can change that." Tessa, who had been quietly absorbing everything, finally spoke. "But Daddy, what if they still want us to leave?" Johnny turned back to face his daughters, the protective fury that had simmered beneath the surface now fully ignited. "They won't push us out," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "Not without a fight. And I promise you I will fight. Every step of the way. I'm doing this for you, for all of us. No one gets to decide our worth." The room fell quiet for a moment, but then Rachel, the oldest, spoke up. "We'll fight too, right? Together?" Johnny smiled, his heart swelling with pride at the strength his daughters were showing. "Together," he affirmed. "We're a family, and nothing can break that." As the girls nodded in unison, Johnny felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world outside could reject them, but within these walls, they were stronger than ever. The battle ahead would be hard, but Johnny knew they would face it with the same unwavering love and determination that had gotten them this far. And as the night wore on, he held on to that promise, knowing that no matter the outcome, his family would always have a home. Together, Johnny nodded, putting the phone down and offering a weary smile. "Yeah, another one," he said quietly. "But don't worry about it. We'll figure things out." Maya looked at him closely, her eyes full of concern. "But it's not just the money, is it, Dad? It's everything, right? The way people are treating us." Johnny sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's hard, sweetheart. Sometimes it feels like no matter how hard we try, some people just won't accept us. But what I want you to know, what I need you all to know, is that we have each other. And that's more than enough." Tessa, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "We're not giving up, right, Dad? We've come this far, we can keep going." Johnny met her gaze, a flicker of pride igniting in his chest. "Absolutely. No matter what happens, we don't back down. We'll keep fighting." Later that night, as the girls went to bed, Johnny lingered in the living room, staring at the handmade card they had given him. Each of their messages of love and support filled him with both comfort and a deep sense of responsibility. He had always worked hard for his family, but now the stakes were higher than ever. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about protecting their right to live freely, without fear of being pushed out because of who they were. The legal fight was draining, physically and emotionally. The more the lawsuit progressed, the more he felt the weight of isolation. Business partners, once close allies, were pulling back. Neighborhood acquaintances who once greeted him with friendly smiles were now giving him wide, uncomfortable berths, avoiding eye contact when they passed by. The isolation stung, but Johnny kept his focus on his family, on what mattered most. He could hear the girls laughing upstairs, a sound that had become a source of comfort, reminding him that no matter what the world thought, inside his home, they had everything they needed. He wasn't about to let that go. As he prepared for the next round of legal proceedings, Johnny reminded himself of his promise to his daughters. They would face this together, no matter how hard it got. And with each passing day, that commitment grew stronger. The next morning, he arrived at his office early, determined to push forward. There was no turning back now. The neighborhood association may have thought they could scare him, but they were wrong. He would not let them break his family. Johnny paused, looking each of his daughters in the eye, his voice filled with unwavering pride. What makes me proudest is how you all keep going, how you keep showing up with love and kindness, despite everything. That's who you are. And that's what matters." The girls exchanged looks, their faces reflecting the quiet strength they had found in each other. Jasmine, with her usual determination, spoke up. "We're not letting them stop us, Dad. We know who we are. And we're not going to change." Rachel nodded, adding, "We can still make a difference, even if it's just by being ourselves." Johnny smiled, his heart swelling with love for his daughters. "Exactly. It's not about changing people who aren't ready to change. It's about staying true to who you are, no matter how hard it gets. And as long as we have each other, nothing else matters." That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, the room buzzed with the kind of warmth and closeness that had become their new normal. There were still challenges, still moments of hurt and rejection, but Johnny knew that his daughters had grown into something beautiful, a family who could face the world together, with heads held high. The small acts of kindness from the community, like the bouquets from Mrs. Henderson or the pastries from Mr. Chen, were not lost on the family. They were reminders that even in the face of adversity, there were people who saw the goodness in them. Johnny wasn't naive. He knew there would be more struggles ahead, more moments when the world would try to push them down. But he also knew one thing for certain: they had already won in the most important way possible. They had each other. And that was more than enough. As the evening drew to a close, Johnny stood up from the table and looked at his daughters. "No matter what, we stand together. And that's how we'll win." The girls smiled, their spirits lifted by their father's words. Together, they had already built something stronger than the prejudice they faced. They had built a family. And that, Johnny knew, was the greatest victory of all. That neighbors' cruel words continued to echo around them, the girls did not falter. They worked in silence, their focus unwavering, their hands steady as they sorted through boxes of food. Johnny couldn't help but feel a swell of pride watching them. They had become resilient in a way he never thought possible. As the morning wore on, the whispers from Mrs. Davidson and her friends grew louder, but the girls simply kept their heads down, letting their actions speak louder than any words thrown their way. Johnny's heart swelled with admiration for his daughters. Each of them, in their own way, was showing the world what true strength looked like. It wasn't in the loudest voice or the most forceful argument. It was in the quiet dignity with which they faced every challenge. The event continued, and the atmosphere shifted as more volunteers arrived, many offering kind words and smiles in contrast to the ridicule Johnny's family had faced. A few of the town's older residents, seeing the girls' work, praised them for their dedication and kindness. "You girls are really something special," Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman, said, her wrinkled hands gently patting Sarah's arm as she passed by. "It's not about fitting in, it's about what you're doing here today. That's what matters." And those words, though simple, were enough. Johnny's daughters beamed with pride, their hearts lifted by the unexpected support. Even if their neighbors couldn't understand their strength, others did. Later, as they loaded the last of the donations into the van, Johnny gathered his daughters together. The crisp autumn air was cool against their skin, but the warmth in their hearts kept them steady. "You've made me proud today," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Not just for your hard work, but for how you held your heads high. You didn't let anyone's words change who you are. That's true beauty." They all smiled, the burden of the morning's cruelty now replaced with a sense of quiet pride. They may have been rejected by some, but they had something far more valuable: their love for one another and the ability to rise above the hate. "Now, let's go home," Johnny said, looking at his daughters with eyes full of pride. "You've done something amazing today, and that's what people will remember." As they drove home, Johnny glanced at each of his daughters in the rearview mirror, his heart filled with love and gratitude. The world may have been unkind at times, but in that moment, in the warmth of their car and the laughter of his daughters, Johnny knew they had everything they needed. Together, they were unstoppable. Noticed his daughters' talents blossoming in unexpected ways. Maya, once quiet and reserved, now had a newfound confidence in organizing both the office and their home life. Rachel, always more introverted, found her voice in the world of business and technology, making a real difference in his day-to-day work. Johnny marveled at the way they had adapted, their growth mirroring the transformation of their family life. One evening, as they gathered for dinner, Tiana looked up from her plate, her eyes gleaming. "Dad," she said, hesitating slightly, "I've been thinking about college. I want to get into a music program. I know I can make it if I work hard." Johnny set his fork down and smiled. "Tiana, you've already proven you can do anything. If music is your passion, I'll support you all the way." Tiana smiled back, her eyes filled with determination. "Thanks, Dad. I want to be the best, not just for me, but for all of us." The pride Johnny felt was overwhelming. His daughters were not only excelling in their personal passions but also taking the initiative to create and pursue their dreams, something Johnny had always hoped for them. As the years passed, their home remained a sanctuary of love and growth. The girls had transformed from vulnerable young women into strong, capable individuals, each learning to navigate the world with grace and confidence. And Johnny, forever their anchor, watched with a heart full of love as his daughters continued to rise above the challenges they had faced. One afternoon, as Johnny sat in the garden, sipping coffee and watching the girls practice a new routine in the dance studio, he felt a deep sense of peace. They had created something beautiful, not just in the way they lived, but in the love and strength they radiated every day. No longer burdened by the judgment of others, they had built a world of their own. One where they were accepted, loved, and celebrated for who they truly were. And for Johnny, that was all that mattered. Small trickle, then steadily growing into a steady stream. Local boutiques began requesting the gift baskets for their stores, and soon they were receiving inquiries from online customers. Johnny watched in awe as his daughter's hard work and dedication turned their small project into a thriving part of his business. The first big order came in just before the holidays, and the girls worked tirelessly to meet the deadline, organizing, packaging, and ensuring every basket was perfect. Johnny marveled at their teamwork, their hands moving with practiced ease as they filled each box with care. The pride in their eyes as they completed their first batch was unmistakable. "This is amazing," Johnny said one evening as they packaged the last basket. "You've all turned an idea into a success. I'm so proud of you." The girls exchanged smiles, their faces glowing with the sense of accomplishment that only hard work and teamwork can bring. As the weeks passed, their business continued to grow. The girls began developing their own ideas for new products, with Tiana suggesting custom-designed greeting cards and Sarah and Maya brainstorming ways to improve the packaging. Rachel, ever the quiet planner, had started handling customer communications, ensuring that every order was fulfilled to perfection. Johnny found himself stepping back more, watching in awe as his daughters took the reins, handling the business with a skill and maturity beyond their years. What had started as a simple family project had evolved into a full-fledged business venture, run almost entirely by his daughters. And as the business flourished, so did their confidence in themselves and in each other. One evening, after a long day of work, Johnny sat in his office reflecting on how far they had come. The sound of laughter from the workshop downstairs echoed through the halls, a reminder of the bond his daughters shared, not just as a family, but as partners in business. They were proving that with love, hard work, and determination, they could accomplish anything. Johnny's heart swelled with pride. They had built something far more meaningful than a successful business. They had built a life of purpose and a family legacy, one that no one could ever take away from them. That local newspaper ran a feature on the family business, showcasing the girls' hard work and entrepreneurial spirit. The article highlighted how the Trent family had transformed adversity into opportunity, building a business that was now thriving because of the girls' creativity and determination. It quickly gained traction, and soon people from neighboring communities began calling, eager to order their handmade goods. "Look, Dad," Tiana exclaimed one evening, holding up a stack of printed orders. "We're getting requests from all over the place." Johnny grinned as he saw the growing list of customers and the increasing number of stores placing orders. His daughters, once seen as outsiders by their neighbors, were now gaining recognition for their talent and business acumen. By the time the holiday season rolled around, the orders were coming in faster than they could keep up. Their home workshop had expanded, with every available space now utilized to store supplies, finished products, and packaging materials. It wasn't long before they had to hire part-time help, employing local teens to assist with some of the more labor-intensive tasks. Johnny was proud to see his daughters manage the growing demands of their business while maintaining the warmth and sense of family that had made it all possible. One evening, after a particularly busy day of packing orders and preparing new stock, Johnny gathered his daughters in the living room for a meeting. "You've all done something extraordinary," he began, his voice thick with pride. "You've turned a simple idea into a thriving business. And now, because of your hard work and determination, people are starting to recognize what we've built here." The girls exchanged smiles, knowing that the business was more than just a way to make money. It was a testament to their resilience, their unity, and their refusal to be defined by other people's expectations. "We've built something lasting," Johnny continued. "But it's not just about the success of the business. It's about showing everyone what we're capable of. And you've all shown that you can achieve anything you set your minds to." The girls beamed, each of them knowing just how far they had come, from the hurt and rejection they had faced in their community to this moment of accomplishment and pride. They had proven not just to their neighbors, but to themselves, that love, family, and hard work could overcome any obstacle. As the months passed, the Trent family business continued to flourish, and the girls' entrepreneurial spirit remained unwavering. They had built something truly remarkable, and they were determined to keep growing, expanding their product line, and showing the world the power of a family united in purpose. Heart racing. He could feel the weight of the moment, the shift in the room, and the deep disappointment threatening to overwhelm him. But as he reached his daughters, he saw their faces, determined, yet full of confusion and hurt. His instincts kicked in. He knelt down, meeting Rachel's eyes, and gently cupped her face with his hands. "Sweetheart," he whispered, "remember what we've talked about. This is your moment, and no one can take that from you. You're doing something amazing." Rachel wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath. The other girls stood by her, their presence a silent but strong reminder that they were a team. Tiana, always the protector, put a reassuring hand on Rachel's shoulder. "Take a deep breath, Rach," Tiana said, her voice steady. "You've got this." Rachel nodded, her confidence slowly returning as she looked out at the crowd. With her father's support and her sisters by her side, she turned back to the microphone. "Our daddy believed in us," she continued, her voice trembling but growing stronger with every word, "and he's taught us that family means everything. No matter what anyone says, we'll always stand together." The room was quiet for a moment. Johnny watched his daughters, filled with pride, as they stood tall despite the whispers and doubts swirling around them. Then the unexpected happened. One by one, a few of the potential investors who had been watching the scene unfolded stepped forward, their expressions softening. They'd seen something real in the girls' determination and the love they had for their father. Johnny stood up, stepping behind his daughters. The whispers continued, but this time they were different. Some guests began clapping, their appreciation evident. Mr. Reynolds, seeing the shift, quickly moved toward the exit with his group, his plans thwarted. "Thank you," Maya said to the crowd, her voice steady now, her earlier nervousness gone. "We may have started out as a family facing challenges, but we've built something beautiful together. We're not just creating gift baskets. We're creating a legacy, a story of love and perseverance." Johnny smiled, his heart swelling with pride as he watched his daughters take their place, not as victims, but as powerful young women who had overcome the odds and were rewriting their story. The crowd, moved by their words, began to applaud louder, showing that even in a room filled with skepticism, genuine determination and family could win the day. As the event drew to a close, Johnny and his daughters received praise for their incredible presentation, and the investors who had originally been skeptical began asking more questions, showing genuine interest in their family business. "We did it, Dad," Tiana whispered to him as they packed up their display. "We showed them who we really are." Johnny nodded, his heart full. "You've all shown them the power of family, love, and hard work. And no one can take that from us." Curling up together on the couch, wrapped in blankets, seeking comfort from each other. The weight of the world seemed to be pressing down on them, but in that moment, Johnny realized that no matter what the outside world thought, they had something far stronger than judgment. They had each other. "Tomorrow we fight back," Johnny said, his voice filled with quiet determination. But not with anger. We're going to show them that nothing can break the bond we share. Our love is stronger than their lies. Tiana, ever the strong one, looked up at her father, her eyes filled with fierce resolve. We're not going anywhere, Dad. We're a family. And we're going to prove it. The other girls nodded in unison, their faces set with quiet strength. Johnny felt a lump form in his throat as he gazed at them. His daughters, his girls, had already proven so much. And despite the false accusations and rumors that surrounded them, they continued to rise above it all, bound together by love and an unshakable belief in each other. The next day, they took action. Johnny began meeting with a lawyer to challenge the neighborhood association's complaints, gathering evidence to prove that his daughters were not only well cared for, but thriving under his care. He contacted local reporters who had previously covered their business success, hoping to set the record straight about their family's story and expose the truth behind the lies. Meanwhile, the girls continued to work on their business, determined to prove that their efforts were a result of their hard work, not exploitation. They posted photos of their latest projects on social media, showing the world how they had turned their creative talents into a thriving venture. Their followers rallied around them, sending messages of support, helping them drown out the noise of the cruel rumors. As days passed, the negativity that had initially clouded their lives began to lift. The community's whispers softened, especially as their handmade goods continued to gain attention. More and more people began to see Johnny and his daughters for what they truly were, a family who had fought through adversity together and come out stronger on the other side. In the midst of the turmoil, one evening as they sat together for dinner, Johnny looked around the table at his daughters. The room was full of laughter and light, the weight of the outside world momentarily forgotten. They had come through the storm, not unscathed, but more united than ever. I don't know how you girls do it, Johnny said, his voice full of pride. You turn every challenge into something beautiful. Sarah, with her small smile, looked up at him. We learned from you, Daddy. You've always been strong, even when things were hard. Johnny felt his heart swell. They had faced so much together, rumors, prejudice, and threats, but they had never faltered. They were more than just survivors. They were fighters. And no matter what the world threw at them, they would always have each other. They would always be a family. Onlookers, but as the weeks passed, more and more neighbors began to take notice. Slowly, the girls' commitment began to spark something in the community. People who had once looked the other way now stepped forward to help, inspired by the Trent sisters' dedication and the quiet strength they displayed in the face of adversity. Johnny noticed the change too. He saw familiar faces, the ones who had once turned away in judgment, beginning to soften. Mrs. Peterson, who had once criticized his daughters, now offered a smile and a nod as she passed them on her morning walk. Even Mrs. Davidson, who had mocked them during their food drive, stopped by one Saturday to offer her support. You girls are really doing something, Mrs. Davidson remarked one morning as she walked past their cleanup station. I didn't think you had it in you. The girls exchanged a look. Then Sarah stepped forward with a polite but firm smile. We're doing what we can. Everyone has to start somewhere. Johnny felt a lump in his throat as he watched his daughters engage with their community, answering questions and offering encouragement to those who joined in. The transformation in the neighborhood was palpable, a subtle shift in the way people looked at the Trent family. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about the change they were making in people's hearts. That afternoon, as the girls cleaned up the final stretch of street, Tiana paused and turned to Johnny, who had been watching from a distance. Dad, you were right, she said quietly. We're not just helping our business anymore. We're showing them who we really are. Johnny nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He had always believed in the strength of his daughters, but now he saw how much they had grown. They weren't just standing tall for themselves, they were standing tall for every family that had ever been judged, ignored, or dismissed. They had become the very example of resilience and grace under pressure. Later that evening, as they all gathered around the dinner table, Johnny smiled at his girls. You've all made a real difference today, he said. I'm so proud of each of you. Maya, always the thoughtful one, looked at her father with a calm, steady gaze. We've learned from you, Dad, she said softly. You always taught us to rise above the noise and keep doing the right thing, no matter what anyone says." Johnny met her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel a deep, peaceful sense of gratitude. His daughters had not only proven their worth, they had changed the entire course of their lives, and in doing so, they were changing the world. "Together, we've got this," Johnny said, his voice thick with emotion. "Nothing can stop us now." And their journey from being rejected and misunderstood to finding strength in their family and their community. Tiana spoke about how they had turned adversity into opportunity, using their skills to help others and make a difference. Sarah shared how their business had started small but had become a symbol of perseverance and love. Maya talked about the tutoring program and how it had given them a chance to connect with the younger children in their neighborhood, fostering a sense of belonging and unity. Even Rachel, usually shy and reserved, spoke about how the girls had never given up, no matter the whispers and the judgment they faced. The room was silent as the girls spoke, the audience captivated by their words and the sincerity in their voices. Johnny watched his daughters, pride swelling in his chest. He had always known they were special, but seeing them stand before a crowd, sharing their story with such strength, made his heart swell even more. When the last sister finished speaking, there was a moment of quiet before the reporters erupted into applause. The room was filled with a mixture of admiration and respect, something Johnny had longed for but never expected. For the first time, he saw the genuine recognition of his daughter's talents and hard work. They were no longer just seen as victims of circumstance, they were seen as a testament to the power of love, resilience, and community. As the press conference concluded, Johnny felt a sense of relief he hadn't realized he was carrying. The rumors, the accusations, they hadn't just been about him, they had been about his daughters, their worth, and their potential. But now, their story had been told on their own terms. Their community was starting to see them for who they truly were. Later that evening, Johnny sat down with his daughters in their now familiar family circle. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You showed the world who you are. Not just who I raised you to be, but who you've always been." Maya, with a quiet smile, nodded. "We didn't do it alone, Dad. We did it together. And we'll keep doing it, for as long as it takes." Sarah, ever the leader, added, "This is just the beginning. We've got so much more to give. We've made a difference in this town, but we can do more." Johnny smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. His girls had not only risen above the cruelty they had faced, they had transformed it. They had turned their pain into a force for good, and in doing so, had brought about real change. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Johnny felt hopeful. The seven sisters had proved something to themselves and to their community. They were stronger than any prejudice, more resilient than any obstacle, and united in a way that no one could tear apart. Together, they were unstoppable. Program that had started as a simple community service project became the foundation for her work. Tessa, who had always been the creative one, pursued a career in design, using the skills she had honed while helping with the family business to create beautiful, functional spaces for people in need. Her talent for transforming humble spaces into welcoming environments was recognized by clients far and wide. Even little Rachel, once shy and unsure, blossomed into a confident advocate for children's rights. She became an outspoken voice for those who had been marginalized, using her platform to raise awareness about child welfare and the importance of family unity. Her empathy and passion earned her a position with a national nonprofit, where she worked tirelessly to ensure that every child had the opportunity to succeed, no matter their background. The family's business continued to thrive, becoming a well-known name not only for their exquisite gift baskets but for their commitment to giving back. The Seven Sisters' legacy had grown beyond their small neighborhood, reaching communities across the country. Johnny, who had once feared he wasn't enough for his daughters, now looked at them with overwhelming pride. They had not only overcome the prejudices and challenges that had once defined their lives, they had risen above them, transforming their pain into power and their love into a beacon of hope. The mansion that had once felt cold and lonely now felt like a true home, a place where love, resilience, and determination had created a legacy that would last for generations. Johnny knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, His daughters were more than prepared. They had shown the world that with love and perseverance, anything was possible. And as they gathered together, sharing stories of their latest successes, Johnny couldn't help but smile. They were his greatest achievement, his pride, and his joy, and together, they had changed the world, the community, and ensuring that the needs of both patients and volunteers were met. His role wasn't just in providing space, but also in offering encouragement and support to his daughters as they worked tirelessly to assist those in need. The Trent family, once seen as outsiders, had now become pillars of strength within the town. The epidemic stretched on for weeks, but the family's dedication never wavered. Maya, Rachel, and Sarah worked around the clock, caring for the sick while coordinating with local health officials to manage the crisis. Tessa's background in social work became invaluable as she provided emotional support to families facing uncertainty. Kira, still early in her medical studies, showed incredible aptitude, taking on tasks well beyond her years, and Jasmine's business acumen helped streamline operations, ensuring that resources were efficiently allocated. As the flu outbreak finally began to subside, the community's respect for the Trent family grew exponentially. The town, which had once turned away from them in judgment, now looked to them as leaders in times of crisis. People who had once whispered about the family now spoke openly with gratitude and admiration. In the aftermath of the epidemic, the Trent sisters were recognized for their selflessness, with several local organizations honoring them for their extraordinary contributions. But to the sisters, the recognition wasn't what mattered most. They had already accomplished what they set out to do: help their community and prove that love, service, and resilience could overcome even the harshest of challenges. Johnny, sitting on the porch one evening as his daughters returned from another long day of service, reflected on how much they had grown. His heart swelled with pride as he watched the girls interact with the community, their earlier struggles now mere shadows of the powerful, compassionate women they had become. He had given them love and support, and they had given the world a living testament to the strength of family, kindness, and perseverance. The Trent family story had come full circle. What began as a tale of overcoming adversity had blossomed into a legacy of giving back, of transforming pain into purpose, and of showing the world that true strength lies not in fighting back, but in lifting others up. And as they stood together, stronger than ever, Johnny knew that no matter what the future held, his daughters were more than capable of facing it with the same courage and determination that had carried them through so much already. Once avoided, the Trent family now stood at the door, asking for help. Despite their previous prejudices, they had nowhere else to turn. Johnny stood by his daughters, unwavering in his support. His heart ached seeing the desperation in the eyes of his neighbors, but he was proud of how his daughters responded. The girls didn't hesitate. They had always believed in serving others, and now, more than ever, their community needed them. With the storm intensifying, the family worked round the clock, providing care to the sick, managing resources, and keeping the spirits of the community high despite the dire circumstances. Tiana and Kira coordinated with the volunteers to keep the flow of food, water, and medicine going. Tessa offered counseling to the families affected, helping to ease their anxiety. Each of the sisters, including the younger ones, played a crucial role in maintaining some semblance of order amid the chaos. The storm raged for days, but the Trent family's makeshift medical center became a symbol of hope. Their hard work, compassion, and quick thinking helped prevent a full-blown disaster. The once critical neighbors who had looked down on the family now saw firsthand the strength and resilience of the Trent sisters, who put aside their past grievances and worked tirelessly to save lives. When the storm finally passed, leaving behind a devastated town, the Trent family was credited with having saved dozens of lives. The community, once divided by prejudice and misunderstanding, now rallied together, united by the selflessness and kindness shown by Johnny and his daughters. The Trent family had proven that love, service, and resilience were more powerful than any storm, and their actions had permanently changed the town's perception of them. Johnny watched as the floodwaters began to recede and the skies cleared. His daughters had faced not only the literal storm but the figurative one as well, years of hardship, criticism, and isolation. And now, they stood stronger than ever, not just surviving but leading, and bringing their community together in ways no one had ever imagined. As the town slowly began to rebuild, the Trent family's reputation was solidified. They had gone from being outsiders to the heart of the community. Their story of compassion, sacrifice, and resilience was no longer a tale of struggle. It had become a legacy of hope. And Johnny knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, his daughters were more than capable of facing them. Together, the sisters led them through the mansion, each step echoing the weight of years of rejection and the humbling shift in the town's attitude. Inside, the house that had once felt cold and alien to them now radiated warmth, a warmth fueled not by luxury, but by the kindness and compassion the Trent family had extended despite the hardships they'd endured. The mansion's grand foyer, now transformed into a triage center, was bustling with activity. Maya immediately took charge, guiding the residents to appropriate areas for treatment, while Rachel and Sarah set to work organizing the limited medical supplies. Kira, eager to help, assisted in setting up additional beds for the sick, her pre-med training kicking in as she worked efficiently alongside the medical team. Tessa coordinated the care for the elderly, ensuring that no one was left without attention. Outside, the storm raged on, the floodwaters continuing to rise. But inside, the Trent family's hard work was keeping the community afloat. As the wealthy residents settled in, humbled and anxious, the sisters worked with unwavering focus, putting aside their past grievances to provide care for those who had once scorned them. Johnny, watching from the corner of the room, felt a deep sense of pride. He had always believed that his daughters had the strength to rise above the cruelty they had faced. But seeing them now, not just surviving but leading, made him realize the true depth of their character. These were his daughters, the same girls who had once been rejected by the world, now holding it together when the world needed them most. As the hours wore on, the storm outside showed no sign of letting up. The once proud residents of the neighborhood, who had once looked down on the Trent family, now found themselves in a position of vulnerability, seeking the very help they had once denied. They had come to realize that money, status, and influence were powerless against the forces of nature, and that the real strength lay in the hearts and hands of those willing to serve others, no matter the cost. The sisters continued to work tirelessly, offering their care without hesitation. Every patient was treated with the same level of compassion, whether they were a longtime friend or someone who had once spoken ill of the family. No one was turned away. The night wore on, and as the storm slowly began to weaken, the neighborhood that had once shunned the Trent family began to rebuild, not just their homes, but their understanding of what truly mattered. The Trent sisters had become more than just the town's medical lifeline. They had become a symbol of redemption and grace under pressure. In the days that followed, as the floodwaters receded and the town began to recover, the changes were undeniable. The Trent family had not only saved lives but had healed the wounds of prejudice and division that had plagued their community for so long. Johnny looked at his daughters with pride as they continued to serve with the same unwavering dedication. Their journey had come full circle, and the once divided neighborhood now stood united. Thanks to the courage and compassion of the Trent family, Maya took a moment to look at Mr. Wellington, his face softened by the exhaustion and regret that had crept into his features. She knelt beside him, offering a glass of water, her eyes meeting his with calm understanding. "You've been through a lot," Maya said gently, her voice low and reassuring. "We're here to help, not to judge." Mr. Wellington hesitated for a moment, his eyes flickering with emotions he had long kept buried. He took the glass from her, his hands trembling slightly. "I've never been more ashamed of myself," he admitted, his voice thick with guilt. "I was wrong about you all, about your father, about everything." Maya nodded, her expression not one of condemnation but of quiet compassion. "We all make mistakes," she replied softly. "But it's how we move forward that matters." As she continued her rounds, she could hear whispered conversations among the patients and their families, many of whom had once stood against the Trent family. There were murmurs of disbelief, of gratitude, and of recognition. The people who had once believed they were above the Trents now found themselves humbled by their unwavering generosity in the face of a crisis. Outside, the storm began to subside, the floodwaters slowly receding, but inside Johnny's mansion, a quiet transformation was taking place. The space, once a symbol of division, now represented unity, compassion, and resilience. The Trent sisters had become the heart of the community, not by seeking acknowledgement, but through their consistent dedication to others. Rachel moved between patients, administering care with precision and tenderness. Sarah, alongside her, was ensuring the well-being of the elderly residents who had once looked down on their family. Tessa comforted anxious parents, while Kira used her pre-med knowledge to assist the doctors. Jasmine continued coordinating with emergency services, ensuring that the community's needs were met without hesitation. By the time the sun began to rise, the storm had passed, but the work was far from over. The community, once fractured by prejudice, was now united in gratitude. Those who had once rejected the Trent family had come to realize that true strength was not about status or wealth, but about the willingness to serve others in their time of need. As the last of the patients were treated and the storm's aftermath began to be assessed, Johnny stood at the entrance of his mansion, watching his daughters move through the space with a quiet sense of purpose. The love he had invested in them, the lessons he had taught them, had blossomed into something that no amount of rejection or hardship could diminish. The Trent family had not just survived, they had thrived, turning a house that had once been a symbol of isolation into a sanctuary for their community. They had shown that love, kindness, and forgiveness were the most powerful forces of all. Mr. Wellington approached Johnny, his demeanor subdued, but respectful. "I never imagined I'd see the day," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I've learned something valuable today. Your daughters, they're the ones who've saved us all." Johnny looked at him, his eyes reflecting years of struggle and triumph. "They've always been capable of greatness," he said quietly. "And now, everyone else sees it too." As the community began to heal, it was clear that the Trent family's legacy would not be defined by the prejudice they faced, but by the strength of their compassion and the undeniable power of standing tall in the face of adversity. The storm had passed, but the bond they had forged with their neighbors would endure long after the floodwaters had receded. Whispered to her husband as she watched the sisters coordinate the medical stations with such skill. "They're not just doctors and nurses, they're true heroes. I see it now." Her husband, Mr. Peterson, nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of awe and regret. "We thought they were just some outsiders, but they're the heart of this town now." Across the room, Rachel directed another group of volunteers, making sure the new arrivals were processed quickly and efficiently. The sisters' professionalism and calm under pressure were evident to everyone watching. What had once been seen as a sign of their outsider status, being so different, was now recognized as their greatest strength, their ability to rise above and serve without hesitation. Johnny, sitting quietly near the entrance, greeted each new arrival with a steady hand on their shoulder or a comforting word. His presence was a silent but powerful testament to his lifelong lesson to his daughters, that true strength comes from serving others, from showing kindness even when it's hardest to do. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Stevens remarked quietly, watching as Maya expertly directed a group of volunteers to set up new supplies. "This town is lucky to have them." Johnny smiled, his heart full of pride as he saw the daughters he had raised not only handle the crisis with skill but also do so with the grace and warmth that had been instilled in them over the years. He remembered their early days, when they had faced so much rejection, and how determined he had been to ensure they were never broken by it. Now, as they worked tirelessly for their community, he knew that his efforts had paid off. Maya paused for a moment, looking over at Johnny. She saw him watching her with a deep, quiet pride, and it made her heart swell with love. She approached him, offering him a cup of water. "You've been amazing through all of this, Dad. We couldn't have done it without you." Johnny took the water, his hand trembling slightly. "You girls were always the ones who were going to make the difference," he replied softly. "I just showed you how to hold your head high." As the storm raged outside, Johnny's mansion had become the lifeblood of the town. Inside, it had transformed from a home that was once filled with tension to a place of compassion and hope. The Trent sisters, whose every act of kindness now spoke volumes about the true nature of strength, continued to work well into the night, their quiet efforts becoming the foundation on which the town would rebuild. The community had underestimated them for so long, but in this moment, they saw the truth. The Trents were no longer outsiders. They were the backbone of the neighborhood, the ones who had saved them when no one else could. The same people who had once turned their backs on Johnny and his daughters were now the ones seeking their help, humbled by the unconditional love and strength the family had shown. As the night wore on, the storm outside began to subside, and the rain turned to a light drizzle. But inside, the true storm of change had taken place, one that would forever alter the fabric of the community. And Johnny, watching his daughters work, knew that no amount of prejudice or rejection could ever again define who they were. Their legacy would always be one of kindness, strength, and the power of family ballroom, where once whispered judgments had filled the air, now hosted community events and gatherings, becoming a place of celebration and togetherness. The mansion, which had been a symbol of rejection, was now the heart of a thriving, united community. Johnny's pride in his daughters grew with each passing day as he saw them not just succeed but uplift those around them, showing what it truly meant to be a family and a community. One morning, as Johnny sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching his daughters laugh and chat in the yard, he felt a deep sense of peace. The hard years of struggle, the rejection, and the pain had led to this moment. His daughters had proven that kindness and love could change the world, and that a father's love, when paired with determination, could heal wounds that seemed impossible to mend. The sisters, now respected professionals, continued to serve their community in countless ways. Tessa's social work expanded beyond the county, Kira's medical practice gained recognition, and Jasmine's business grew, providing employment for many in the town. They used their success to give back, always keeping in mind the struggles they had faced and the people who had once turned away from them. The bonds between them grew stronger with each day, as they all worked together to create lasting change, both in the town and within their own lives. Their story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that the power of love, compassion, and resilience could turn even the darkest moments into something beautiful. The town's transformation was mirrored in the hearts of its people. Old grudges faded, and the walls of prejudice that had once divided them crumbled. The lessons Johnny and his daughters had taught were passed down to future generations, ensuring that the cycle of kindness, understanding, and acceptance would continue for years to come. As the seasons passed and the town blossomed, Johnny found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had led them to this point. His family had risen from the ashes of rejection to become a living testament to the power of forgiveness and the unbreakable bond of love. And in the quiet of his study, with the portraits of his daughters smiling back at him from the walls, Johnny knew that the greatest legacy he could leave was the example of what it meant to choose love over hatred, to choose kindness even in the face of adversity, and to always stand together as a family. Trent's sisters made sure I got my medicine and helped me when I couldn't get out of bed. They didn't have to, but they did. They treated me like family. The crowd was moved, some wiping tears, as the stories of kindness and selflessness poured in. Johnny and his daughters sat quietly, humbled by the outpouring of gratitude. For years, they had been the target of scorn and exclusion, but now, they were the ones receiving thanks, not just for their heroic actions during the crisis but for teaching the town an invaluable lesson about love, community, and forgiveness. As the ceremony continued, Johnny stood and addressed the crowd, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This is not just about what we did," he said, his eyes sweeping over the faces of the people who had once turned their backs on them. "It's about the change that has happened in all of us. The change that we can continue to make together." The crowd applauded, their cheers louder than ever before. This was not just a moment of recognition for Johnny and his daughters, but a turning point for the entire community, a shift from division to unity, from prejudice to understanding. As the event came to a close, Johnny's daughters embraced each other, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced so much together, and now they had become symbols of what could be accomplished when love, perseverance, and compassion were at the forefront. Later that evening, as the sun set over the park, Johnny stood with his daughters, watching the people of the town gather around the new community center. The transformation of the town, once driven by fear and rejection, had now become a place where everyone, regardless of their background, was welcomed and valued. Johnny placed a hand on his youngest daughter's shoulder, his eyes filled with pride. "You've all done something incredible," he said softly. You've shown them that love is always stronger than hate." And as they stood together, the sounds of laughter and conversation filling the air, Johnny knew that the legacy of his family, built on the foundation of love and compassion, would carry forward for generations to come. The warmth of the community's acceptance surrounded them. The storm had passed, not just in the weather, but in the hearts of the people. Johnny smiled down at his daughters, feeling the weight of their shared journey, the struggles, the doubts, the pain, all transformed into this moment of triumph and love. Maya looked up at her father, her voice filled with emotion. "We never gave up, did we, Dad?" she asked, her eyes shining. "No," Johnny replied softly, his hand resting on her shoulder. "We never gave up. And look at the world we've helped create, together." The crowd continued to cheer, but Johnny's thoughts drifted back to the early days, before the crisis, when they had been dismissed and judged. He had never imagined that their journey would bring them here, to this moment of acceptance and respect. He had always taught his daughters that true strength came from kindness, and now, the town had witnessed it firsthand. As the applause slowly quieted, Johnny stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you," he began, looking out at the sea of faces. "Thank you for showing us that no matter how hard things get, love and compassion will always find a way. This is the community we've always dreamed of, a place where everyone is welcome, no matter their background." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Then, one by one, people began to approach the Trent family, offering their apologies and gratitude. Mrs. Wellington, who had once been one of their harshest critics, now stood before Johnny, her eyes full of sincerity. "I was wrong," she said softly, "about everything. You and your daughters have shown us what it means to truly be a family, and I'll be forever grateful for that." Johnny gave a gentle nod, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for recognizing that," he replied, his voice warm and forgiving. "We're all part of this community, and it's never too late to come together." The day unfolded like a celebration of love, forgiveness, and unity. As Johnny and his daughters walked through the crowd, they shared moments of laughter, exchanged stories, and embraced the very people who had once treated them as outsiders. The town, once divided, had been reborn through their example of grace, compassion, and resilience. And in that moment, Johnny knew that the legacy of the Trent family would live on, not just in the plaque in the park, but in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by their journey. The love they had given and the strength they had shown would forever be a part of the community they had helped heal. Confident young women, each one embodying the lessons Johnny had instilled in them: resilience, kindness, and the power of love. His heart swelled with pride as he watched them interact with the community, their actions speaking volumes about the strength of their character. As Johnny stood in the heart of the town square, surrounded by neighbors and friends, he couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The memories of those early days, when they had been shunned, judged, and rejected, felt distant now, like shadows fading in the light of their new reality. The town, once cold and unwelcoming, had been transformed by the very family it had tried to cast aside. Maya, the eldest, smiled at him, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We did it, Dad," she whispered, her voice thick with pride. "We really did it." Johnny nodded, his own voice catching in his throat. "We did it together. And now we have a home here. A real home." The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the square as people gathered to celebrate the newfound unity. There was laughter, music, and joy in the air. It was a celebration not just of survival but of transformation, a community reborn through the strength and compassion of a family that had never stopped believing in the goodness of others. Mrs. Peterson, still teary-eyed, stood beside Johnny, her hands shaking as she held a plate of cookies. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I was one of the ones who doubted you. But now I see how wrong I was. You've shown us all what it means to be truly good." Johnny placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression gentle. "We all make mistakes," he said softly. "What matters is that we learn from them and move forward. Together." As the evening wore on, more and more people approached the Trent family, offering their apologies, their thanks, and their newfound respect. The warmth of the community enveloped them, and Johnny knew that, despite everything they had endured, This moment was the culmination of a journey worth every hardship. His daughters had grown into strong, compassionate leaders, and the town had finally recognized them for who they truly were, not the family they had once tried to exclude, but the heart and soul of the community. The journey had been long, but the rewards were immeasurable. The Trent family was no longer outsiders. They were home. Johnny and his daughters stood in the heart of the community, their faces glowing with pride as they witnessed the transformation they had all worked so hard for. The laughter of children echoed in the background, their carefree play symbolizing the new beginnings that had sprouted from the seeds of understanding and forgiveness. The circle of unity they had helped create surrounded them, each member of the community now bound together by respect and love. The barriers of prejudice and division had crumbled, replaced by bonds of friendship and empathy. Johnny looked at his daughters, each of them smiling, confident in who they had become. More importantly, they had stayed true to the kindness their father had taught them, never letting cruelty or judgment harden their hearts. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the park, Johnny realized they had accomplished something beyond acceptance. They had helped build a new kind of family, one that wasn't bound by blood or status, but by shared experiences, love, and the power of forgiveness. It was a community that understood what it meant to stand together, to lift one another up, and to embrace differences rather than fear them. The once divided neighborhood now stood united, a testament to the strength of the Trent family's perseverance. The story of Johnny and his 7 daughters was no longer one of rejection, but one of triumph and hope, woven into the very fabric of the town's history. It was a story that would be told for generations to come. And as the crowd continued to celebrate, Johnny turned to his daughters, his heart full. They had overcome so much together, and now they had something far more valuable than they had ever dreamed, a community that truly embraced them for who they were. If you enjoyed the story of Johnny and his 7 daughters, I've handpicked another heartwarming tale that I'm sure will touch you deeply. Please don't miss it. Click here to watch it now.